All right, Mr. Chair, you are now live.
Okay, thank you. Was there something else that you wanted to mention, Claudia?
No, just the human, to repeat now that we're live, the Annapolis Human Relations Commission made 2 presentations, and the Human Resources Department provided that accompanied the awards to the 2 high schools in Annapolis that we do annually. And that would be the end of my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would just like to mention that Annapolis High School did a virtual senior awards program this year. I videotaped a message for that and also hand carried the plaque and the check to the school counselor who would pass it along to the winner. St. Mary's did something unusual. St. Mary's held an in-person senior awards event, but they did not allow any of the outside people to be present. So I simply turned the plaque and the check over to the guidance counselor at St. Mary's High School, and I presume that they took care of that. In terms of my my report this evening, just to let the commission know that we had hoped to have Alderman Rob Savage to be with us in order to talk about the legislation O-12-21, and we are going to address that very, very shortly. However, tonight, City Council is trying to wrap up all of its budget issues in a day-long marathon, which started at 10 a.m. this morning and will go on until they finish it, which could be who knows what time early in the morning. Rob said it was unlikely he could join us, but I will brief him on the outcome of our discussion this evening. You did receive, all commissioners did receive by email the minutes for our April meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, the minutes shall stand approved by common consent. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Birgitta Sundstrom from City of Annapolis TV, who is going to be facilitating with us this evening with the technological issues on Zoom. So I'd like to thank her for her help. I have had several email conversations with Carrie Berger, who is joining our meeting, has regularly been attending our meetings. Carrie is an assistant city attorney for the City of Annapolis, and she is assigned, among other things, to the commission to advise the commission on legal matters. And the commission needs to give this very, very special consideration and attention to that. She is the attorney for the commission. And as the commission knows, but maybe just peripherally from some emails, which I think were sent to you, there were concerns expressed about O-12-21, that's the police enhancement and community engagement, the proposed ordinance introduced by Alderman Rob Savage. And there were some concerns expressed about that, including some dealing with the specific expansions of the duties of the Human Relations Commission. So I'm going to call at this time on Ms. Berger to share with the commission where things stand with regard to this legislation now. What are the concerns that the Office of Law and the city manager have with the legislation? And how does this all relate to the legislation on police reform, which was passed by the Maryland General Assembly in its last session? So, Carrie, could you brief the commission on this?
Sure. I'm not going to get sort of, I guess, too detailed just because, one, I don't want to speak on behalf of Alderman Savage or any of the other co-sponsors. And two, there's a lot that still hasn't really been presented to the city council, but I'll give you guys an update as to the progress of how things have unfolded since the legislation's been introduced and what sort of conflicts or comparisons there are with the state legislation that was passed about a month ago. So after the legislation was introduced, there has been smaller working groups that have consisted of myself, Alderman Savage, Alderman Arnett, Alderwoman Tierney, City Manager Gerald, and Rhonda McCoy from the police department. And we've gone over the legislation as drafted and as introduced and sort of made some changes to either clarify some of the language or to remove it. Or, you know, I think there's been some additions as well. Now, there's a good chunk of it that sort of falls under the purview of the state legislation, whether it's either superseded by the state legislation, whether it's redundant with the state legislation, or whether it's in conflict, so it wouldn't be superseded anyway. But we're sort of kind of parceling that out and cleaning up the legislation to reflect those state changes, meaning that there's no conflict and there's, you know, going to be certain parts that Alderman Savage may want to keep in the legislation, even if it is redundant with the state legislation. But again, I don't really want to sort of speak on his behalf, so I don't want to, you know, get too in detailed with that. But one of the things that we're pretty set on, at least my understanding, is the proposed changes to the Human Relations Commission. Now, I don't know if you guys have the legislation in front of you or if it's easily accessible, but there are proposed additions to your guys' duties. And I guess the best way to go through it is does everyone have it that they can easily look at it, or is it just easier if I kind of talk at you?
Yeah, well, the agenda which went out to the commissioners, both for the meeting in April, which of course we canceled, and then this one did specify the 5 proposed expansions of the duties of the Human Relations Commission. If you've got those, I've got them before me, and I can simply go down them one at a time and read them off and then let you comment on them. Would that be satisfactory?
I'm happy to sort of take it one by one and then
Okay.
add any comments as I go through it.
Okay.
So,
All right. Okay. The legislation as submitted by Alderman Savage and his, I think, 3 co-sponsors, and 1 co-sponsor I think is withdrawn, basically touched upon the Human Relations Commission's authority in 5 areas. The first is to conduct at least 1 public forum each calendar year for the purpose of receiving community input on policing matters.
So the follow-up to that is I think we're going to incorporate that sentence in what's already in your functions now. So there's parts that say that you guys accept complaints relating to discrimination and then refer those complaints to the appropriate authorities and then arrange for public hearings. So we're going to kind of tweak your current duties to include that language, and then also have language in there that indicates a sort of a reporting requirement that you would have to submit a report or present to the city council once a year on any of, I guess, the logistics of those hearings.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I think you've touched on 2 other things that were part of the legislation there. But, you know, the commission does have the authority to hold public hearings. That is in the legislation. So asking us to conduct at least 1 public forum each year, again, for the purpose of receiving community input on policing matters. All that does is simply say, is what the council would be saying is you already have the authority to hold public hearings, but we want you to hold a public hearing once a year on the issue of policing matters. And the implication is that when the commission does hold a public hearing, it always follows up with a report to the mayor and city council. We always do that. So all this is doing, if this stays in the law, is it would simply add a requirement, an annual requirement to the commission to do a public hearing on this subject and ultimately report back its findings to the mayor and the city council. So I would just ask our attorney, do you agree that that is within the scope and parameters of the commission's responsibilities and authority if it was passed in that way? Okay, now I'm going to ask commissioners, is this something that you, because again, this is all a proposed ordinance, and somewhere down the line, I'm probably going to have to come before the council and say how the commission feels about this. I've already had one of the co-sponsors, Alderman Arnett, actually contacted me and said, you know, will the commission do this? Is this going to be within your workload, you know, and that kind of thing. And I told him I had to talk to the commission about it. So this is coming back to commissioners for this first item. Any concerns that you have regarding this part of the legislation in terms of conducting at least one public forum each calendar year on the issue of community or providing community input into policing on policing matters? Any thoughts about that? What are your feelings about it? Helen?
Well, suppose there's no issue that we need to do that. Suppose nothing comes up that there's a need for us to do that.
Well, the way this is saying is that we would just hold a hearing and people would
You have to
comment.
do it anyway.
You
Okay.
can do it. That's right. You basically just hold a hearing on that subject, on the subject of receiving community input. Basically what it would be, it would call a public hearing. It would be in a specific location. It would go out via the public information office. It would be publicized widely. And then we would simply hear from whomever came to the hearing if they had some comments that they wanted to make on policing matters.
So just to clarify then, when we go ahead and have this community meeting, our role is just to take feedback from the public, not necessarily answer questions. Is it more like a focus group or an impact group type of format? Is that what we envision?
What it would be a public meeting. It'd be a public event in which commissioners would simply call on individuals who came. If individuals had questions or concerns they wanted to express about police matters, we would listen to their concerns and then we would tabulate them and pass them along to the mayor and city council. We could also add recommendations to that too. The commission doesn't have to do that, but in the past, we usually do have some recommendations to make when we have public hearings. So we could make recommendations. But what it would do is just be an annual requirement that on the issue of policing matters, that the public would have an opportunity to express their thoughts. And again, this would be open to the residents of the city of Annapolis before the City Human Relations Commission. Not be with.
Is this,
Yeah,
does
Jay?
this have just a very broad scope on police matters? Is it more of police misconduct? Or I'm asking this because I know that we, at least Chuck and I were part of a task force at one point in time for police misconduct, or at least, or at least on a program that has stopped, I guess, having, and had this community aspect or community forum aspect of being included on police matters or some element with police matters. Is this something that is supposed to be for police misconduct or just general police matters, whatever police matters might be?
The latter.
So what does that potentially include? That everything?
That's right.
Employment.
Anything that falls under the scope of policing matters that the community wants to comment about. The community would have an annual opportunity to come before the commission to raise any issues that they wanted to as it relates to policing. And we would report back on it.
And it would be made clear to the participants that we are not there to resolve anything. We're just there to take their comments and pass it on.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, any additional thoughts you have on that? Does anyone have any objection to the city council passing something like that? Expanding our duties in that way? Okay, I don't hear any objection to it. All right, so we're going to move on to the second item. And the second item is accept and review correspondence and comments from members of the general public. Well, that's sort of tied with the first one. It seems to me if you have a public hearing and someone says, I can't come to the public hearing, but I'm going to write something up and submit it to you, that would be part of the whole process. Is that your understanding of that, Carrie?
Yeah, yeah, the plan is to, and I say the plan now just because it hasn't been memorialized in an amendment form, so it is still subject to change, but as it currently, we sort of have a tentative plan to incorporate A and B of the two that were just read in the already existing duties, and that is sort of one of the same. If someone can't attend that public forum or at any time during the year, let's say you guys scheduled the public forum for June 30th. If someone, October 15th has a comment that they want to make, they can then submit it. So it's not necessarily limiting the ability of someone to submit comments on policing to that one date and time for when the forum takes place, but it allows for individuals to submit comments year round, basically. But that's essentially the gist of it. And the accepting and review, the reviewing part would be somewhat limited in the sense of now that there's been this creation of boards under the state legislature, it wouldn't be reviewed for investigatory reasons or anything like that. It would be probably reviewed more so for purposes of making sure that the appropriate agencies get referred or get the correspondence referred to.
Okay, Chuck, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, sorry I'm late.
Okay, what we're doing is we're simply going through the sections of the proposed ordinance, Police Enhancement Community Engagement Ordinance that
Right.
pertain to the Human Relations Commission. We've just completed conducting at least one public forum each calendar year for the purpose of receiving community input on policing matters and accept and review correspondence and comments from members of the general public. There was no objection to either one of those, recognizing here what the commission would do would just simply changes the law to say that on this particular issue, policing matters, that the commission would hold an annual hearing. The third item is
I
the
have a
one
concern that it's,
excuse me?
I just have a concern that it's pretty vague. And
Mhm.
it just seems like the correspondence should be related to some specific police activity as opposed to, I got a parking ticket and my car was towed away and I don't think that should have happened. Well, if they write that in October and nothing's going to happen until June, it just doesn't seem to flow
Mhm.
right.
Mhm. Well, one thing I could do is I am going to communicate to Alderman Savage the results of what we've discussed here, and I can simply say that concern was raised. And other folks, you can offer your thoughts as well, but that the commission would like to have a sense of some specificity on what these hearings would involve. If we're going to do an annual, I could explain to them, the commission simply ask the question of, if we're going to hold an annual question, we'd like to have some parameters in terms of what we're going to be reporting about, rather than simply saying it's we're going to do an annual hearing on, quote, policing matters, end of quote. So I can pass that comment along. Is there others who feel the same way?
I do.
Okay.
It brought up a very good point.
Okay.
I do like having the parameters around what exactly we will be focused on.
Okay,
Because I think Diane's right in that people will bring their parking tickets as an agenda item, and we really don't want to go.
okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, I would think we
I
might,
also agree.
What?
Jay?
Jay, was,
If
I know, I
could
was
just
saying
look-
that I agree as well. I mean,
Oh, you
instead of,
agree?
and with general police matters just isn't specific enough as to know what it is that purpose
okay,
is, or policing matters is just not clear as to what it is that we are hearing and also to report on. And I guess without a scope as to what, I guess I just don't know what the scope of it would be and what our general or what the purpose or intended purpose is supposed to be for.
okay. All right, well, others, Chuck?
Mike, I would be comfortable with there needs to be a balance, obviously, of some parameters, but the issue really is profiling. And anybody that feels they've been profiled should be able to bring that concern forward
Mm-hmm,
and have a fair review of it.
okay,
I'm not sure it's going to be parking tickets. I think it will be more the concern that they were received what they perceived to be unequal treatment.
Yeah, it should have something to do with discrimination if
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
us.
Yeah.
Kara,
But
do you
it can be
agree?
a balance. I'm fine with having it more specific than it is, but it ought to be open enough that anybody that perceives that they have been profiled in any way should be able to bring that forward for a fair hearing.
okay,
That's different than just the general way it's stated.
But yeah, I guess I took it as implying that that's what, I mean, that's the overall purpose of the bill is pretty related to profiling, and I carried that forward. I'm fine with the more specificity though. Just that it needs to be a balance so that it doesn't discourage people from coming forward with their concerns.
okay,
So this is kind of jumping ahead, but it does touch on the other three parts. But since Chuck brought it up, I'll just jump right into it. The issue with sort of just so that we're clear, because of the state legislation and the changes, that really dictates how, let's say someone comes forward with a discrimination complaint. You guys as a body would not be able to investigate or really do anything other than refer it to either the Police Accountability Board or the department itself for investigation. So the way that the state legislature is set up, for everyone's edification, is if a member of the public makes a complaint, they can make that complaint, as I just stated, to either what is called a Police Accountability Board or the police department itself. Now, then the police department has to investigate that complaint. And at the conclusion of the investigation, they will send it to what's called an administrative charging committee. And that administrative charging committee reviews the investigation and either sends it back to the investigating agency for either more investigation or to have follow-up questions or things along those lines, or they make a decision as to whether or not to administratively charge the individual or the officer, or not administratively charge the officer. So if they make the decision to administratively charge, then they also make a recommendation as to discipline. The police chief is bound to that discipline recommendation, except for the police chief is also, or is able to impose stricter discipline. So the police chief can get more sort of restrictive or more punitive with the discipline, but can't be more lenient. And both the administrative charging committee and the police chief will have to adhere to this uniform disciplinary matrix that's going to be created statewide. So as long as it's within sort of the discipline is within that range for that particular misconduct that's part of the disciplinary matrix, the police chief can have more punitive or severe punishment than what is recommended by the administrative charging committee, but the administrative charging committee does have like a sort of a bottom threshold as to what the discipline should be. And then there are sort of appellate rights that the officer can take in the form of a trial board, which has been established by state law and going through the court's process. So when it comes to investigating for disciplinary purposes, it really is limited to that process that I just described, and it doesn't allow for sort of the wiggle room of any other public body or entity sort of doing investigatory work or recommendations as it relates to discipline.
I lost.
So that's one of the big changes in the state legislation, and it does have an impact on the proposed changes that were made by Alderman Savage, and he's aware of that.
Yeah, the third item that was is contained in the original measure, and Alderman Savage in a communication with me did mention that there was some issues as it related to state law and to other bodies. The third section or the third part of the law which relates to us, and this would be related to the commission's authority. It says establish procedures for the processing of complaints related to profiling or discriminating policing practices. Okay, the commission in the city code has the authority to receive complaints of discrimination, and that we have broadly defined. If we receive a written complaint, then what happens is the commission's complaints committee will review the complaint and then make a recommendation to the full commission as to whether or not to accept the complaint for mediation. If mediation proves not to be a possible course of action, then the commission can refer that complaint to another body. That could include the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, the U.S. Equal Opportunity Commission, EEOC, or to, if the council ultimately adopts a civilian advisory panel, refer it to them. So that would be, the commission would not have formal investigatory authority in that area unless for some reason the complaint dealt with a fair housing issue. The commission does have authority in city code to investigate fair housing issues. So I'm not sure that section of the law would really change anything the commission currently does. If the commission received, and I can't remember a case in which this occurred, commission received a complaint from a resident, outlining a problem that they had with a police officer with respect to the policing practices or profiling or whatever, then we would follow the same process. The complaints commission would look into it. The complaints committee would look into it, bring a recommendation to the commission. If the commission approved it for mediation, then we would contact both the parties. They could come together to mediate it. If for some reason one of the parties said, no, we don't want to mediate this, which is always possible, then the commission's sole and final authority would be to refer it to a body that could presumably investigate it. So I don't see where that particular provision, if that particular provision were adopted just the way it's worded, establish procedures for the processing of complaints related to profiling or discriminatory policing practices, I'm not even sure that that's even necessary to be in there, because the commission already has a written set of procedures for the handling of complaints. So there's nothing, all of that is just basically just reinforcing what the commission already has the authority to do, unless, and I'm going to address this to Carrie Berger,
Yes.
unless you are suggesting that the commission under no circumstances should ever get involved in a citizen complaint that would relate to the police.
That the way
that-
that the legislation is written, that's what I'm saying, yes, because the legislation says if a member of the public has a complaint on a police officer, they can either send it to a police accountability board or they can send it to the department for an investigation. So if a member of the public comes to you guys with a complaint on policing, I don't think you guys would have the authority to mediate or attempt to mediate. I think you would have to kind of treat it as if mediation didn't work and either refer it to the appropriate agencies, whether it's the police accountability board or whether it's some other entity. But I don't think that you guys would have the authority to mediate because that does sort of involve a little bit of an investigatory work on your end, which the state legislation does not allow for.
So you're saying that okay, Chuck?
Well, Carrie, is the Police Accountability Board, is that the same, in your terms, is that would that include the Civilian Review Board if it is adopted?
So
Is
I
that a
think
different entity?
I think in practice, yes. I think that there's, depending on how the civilian review boards either currently exist or how they're sort of being formulated, they would be containing either functions of the police accountability boards and or the administrative charging committees. Now, I will say that each county has to have a police accountability board and an administrative charging committee. So the need for a civilian review board in a lot, if not all, counties and cities and everything like that are kind of go by the wayside, because what is envisioned with the civilian review boards is going to be accomplished by the police accountability boards and or the administrative charging committees. If that sort of makes sense, I can try to articulate it better, but they are sort of, I don't want to say one and the same, but they do have a lot of shared qualities based on the civilian review boards that are either in the middle of being created or have already been created, and what is in state law now with those police accountability boards and administrative charging committees.
Yeah, as things stand right now, we don't have a live complaint from a citizen regarding any police practices. And I don't recall, going back in the years I've been on the commission, that we ever had. But what would be your advice, Carrie, if for some reason we get a complaint from a citizen who says that I was treated in a discriminatory fashion by a police officer right now? If tomorrow we get a complaint from a citizen and they raise, I was profiled by this officer, or this officer discriminated against me in some respect, or I was not treated civilly by that officer, what would you advise the commission to do? Because I remember, again, the commission has the authority to receive complaints as it relates to, and it's a broad area of discrimination. And the way the commission has done that is we're pretty much taken anything that's a complaint and we've at least tried to set up some type of mediation. And if we fail, then we've done other things. But the commission right now in the city code does have that authority to receive complaints. There's no limitations on it. It doesn't say the commission shall receive complaints except in the following circumstances. There's nothing in there. It just says we can receive complaints. So what I'd like to hear from you is to have some advice for this commission as to how we can proceed if we get that kind of a concern expressed to us in a formal written document that we receive from an individual.
So under the current law, if you were to receive a letter or some sort of written correspondence, or it could even probably be oral complaint of a police officer's actions, LEOBR requires that any investigation that's done be done by a sworn law enforcement officer. So currently, until that law changes next year, you would have to refer it to the internal affairs section of the police department so that they can investigate. And that is pretty much it, because that's what LEOBR requires.
What, now, what would require that? I want to make sure I understand.
Law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, but that legislation, the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights was repealed, right?
Correct, but it's still in effect
It's still,
until
okay,
July of 2022.
Okay.
okay. And is it the intent, once that legislation is officially off the books, what would the commission's standing be then? Or would it depend on what legislation was adopted by the city council?
No, so this is one where state law is going to essentially control. So now you could still receive any complaints that come in. You would just have to refer it to the appropriate agency. So you would
Okay.
have to refer it to the Police Accountability Board, is then going to refer it to the Internal Affairs section of the police department, or you could refer it directly to the Internal Affairs section of the police department. But the
Okay.
state legislation dictates that any complaint from a member of the public either go to the Police Accountability Board or directly to the department.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that should the commission receive a complaint of this nature, that it should not even try to mediate it. It shouldn't even seek mediation. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, right now, yes, absolutely. But I think also because mediation has a component of investigation, that yes, with the new legislation as well, that you would not, or you'd be severely limited in your ability to mediate.
Okay. And that would be the case even if both parties chose to mediate. It would be something, basically, if we receive a complaint on policing matters, we basically have to refer this to some other entity besides the Human Relations Commission under the current law. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
Okay, all right. In that case, you've got two sections of the ordinance, which it seems to me would create an immediate conflict if they're adopted. The one I just read, establish procedures for the processing of complaints related to profiling or discriminatory policing practices. We already have the processes in place to handle complaints, but in this case, what you're saying basically is that we could not seek mediation in the case of a complaint based on discrimination by the police or policing matter. And therefore, there's really no reason to even have that section in the law at all, because it would set the commission up for establishing procedures that might not be consistent with state law or other legislation passed by the city council. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, this was drafted and introduced prior to the passage of the state law.
Okay.
So at the time when Alderman Savage had finalized this draft, he
Yeah.
obviously wasn't aware of what was going to be passed by state law. This is just
Okay.
one of those consequences of the legislation.
Okay, section 4, which is comes right after it, and this is again, it's talking about the powers of the commission. It says coordinate with the mayor's office to provide forms or establish electronic means for submitting complaints related to profiling or discriminatory practices. Seems to me that should not be a responsibility of the commission in light of what you've just told us. It seems to me the mayor's office ought to handle that alone. I mean, we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's absolutely no reason to have us even involved in this, since our powers are just so limited. It would, if in terms of providing forms or other electronic means, I mean, the commission has it already. We've got forms that people can access by simply going online or requesting that the forms be mailed to them by email, or they can, or by US mail, or they can pick up the forms in our office, or they can fill out the application online. We've got that. There's lots of ways they can submit a complaint of discrimination. But there's no reason for us to to do what it says here, because for all practical purposes, our role in complaints that come in related to profiling or discriminatory practices are just so limited that that makes no sense. So then we go to section 5. Submit an annual report on all complaints received relating to profiling or discriminatory policing practices. Once again, I see no sense to have that at all. Once again, our role is so limited and so prescribed. I mean, how can we do an annual report on complaints that we really can't do anything but simply refer it to other parties? We have no even remote type of investigatory authority. All we could do is, if we do get a complaint, it would be in our annual report, which we make to the city. The commission, like all boards and commissions, submit an annual report to the city. And if we get a complaint, that would be included on that. But to do a separate annual report on complaints on something that you're saying we have no authority over makes no sense for us to have that at all. Am I correctly interpreting your comments, Carrie?
I mean, essentially, yes. You could still report on it and have it sort of tie in with any of the forum, like the reporting related to doing the at least once a year forum and everything like that on policing matters. And if there's a scope that's sort of restricted to that, but in terms of follow-up or in terms of investigation, right, you would be severely limited. So it would basically just be reporting on the numbers of complaints received and referred.
Let me ask a couple of questions if I could, Mike.
Yeah.
Obviously the issue of discriminatory police activity has been festering in the community for decades. And Carrie, am I right that as long as our investigation didn't deal with specific officers and specific, charges and offenses in that area, we could certainly discuss and take testimony and whatever of people about the general issue of policing, in Annapolis, just not on specific officers. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it could be as part of that forum, or it could be a separate complaint that comes in saying, my interactions with the police department as a whole, or I feel that the police department is doing this incorrectly or whatever. Anything that isn't specific to an officer is not specified or specific enough that it could be construed as an investigation into an officer, someone could certainly do. So if it's practiced the department as a whole, yes, absolutely.
Right. Like, one example that came close to that, am I right, Mike, was the issue of the cemetery manager essentially calling law enforcement about the mom and her two sons. Obviously, the flaw was that it was filed, way beyond the dates we could respond to. I mean, it didn't meet the deadlines that are inherent in our procedure. But that would be an issue of a person that felt that they had received discriminatory treatment involving police officers, but not the discrimination really was by the cemetery manager, not the police officers.
Right.
And I think that might, I certainly would not want to be precluded from looking at that if one happens like that in the future.
And you wouldn't be, based on this legislation, based on your current responsibility and responsibilities,
Right.
based on the proposed legislation that's going to be amended, and based on the state legislation, you wouldn't be precluded from looking into something like that.
As long as we stay clear of specific officers and specific charges, our general commission, guidelines, I think would take place. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's an excellent clarification, Chuck. Thank you for making that. What it sounds to me like, and I am going to, I've got an email which I'm going to respond to Alderman Savage, who, as I mentioned earlier, he's tied up in budget hearings, which could go until 1 o'clock or even later this morning. what I'm going to relate back to him is that, the commission was supportive of the proposal about holding an annual public forum for the purpose of receiving community input on policing matters and receiving any correspondence or comments from the members of the general public on this subject, with the understanding that the council needed to provide greater detail regarding what constituted policing matters, that there needed to be greater detail, that we were looking for a balance, that we're not trying to discourage people from coming and reporting things. We're going to encourage people to come, but we would sort of like the council's guidance as to what specifically they're looking for here, because it will result in the commission submitting a report to the council. And again, it says that they want us to submit an annual report on all complaints. Well, we'll submit an annual report. It'll be a report of what comes out of the annual hearing, which we would hold. And I'll work with Rob on this. I'll say you need to tighten that up. You need to get more specifics. And I am going to tell him that as far as the commission's concerned, that sections 3 and 4 of the legislation really is going to be precluded, is in fact precluded by the current law that's on the books, and is likely to be precluded by the new law, which the General Assembly passed in its last session. So that's how I'm going to approach Alderman Savage on it. Are there any concerns about that? And I'm probably going to do that this evening.
Can I just sort of give you a point of sort of clarity, because I want to make sure that you guys know that the legislation is drafted and as amended is going to allow for at least one forum every year on policing. So if another sort of complaint came in, you could theoretically have 2. I don't know if you guys want to limit yourselves to 1, but when you're responding to Alderman Savage, you may want to, I guess, make it clear that if the commission only wants to limit it to 1, to make that known. But as it's written and as I was going to amend it, it was going to allow for more than 1. So just so you guys are
You
clear
mean
on
more
that.
than one public hearing, you mean?
Potentially okay with it.
Are you saying more than one public hearing?
Yeah, I mean, it says conduct at least one public forum each calendar year.
Yeah, at least one.
So you could have more than 1 if you wanted.
Yeah, and I think it's fine for that to be in the legislature. If the commission wanted to hold another hearing,
I just
it
wanted to
certainly
make it
could.
clear, because I know I kept referring to it as annual, so I wanted
Yeah.
to sort of clarify my statements that it not limited.
Yeah, the way it's worded, it says conduct at least one public forum each calendar year. So it's at least one. And we're hearing is that the commission, I think, is receptive to that. And I'll tell Alderman Savage that, but I'll also add the concerns that commissioners have about greater clarification on our specific responsibilities in those areas. And that's something that he would have to work on with his, with the 3 co-sponsors to his legislation. Are there any other comments about this? Any other thoughts people want to share? Okay, well, I would just like to thank Carrie Berger for talking us through this process, and this is, I think, very, very helpful to the commission. Again, Carrie is the assistant city attorney who is basically assigned to the commission, and this has been very, very important that we have this understanding before the city council goes forward with this. And I'm encouraged to hear that you do have working groups that are been empowered to look into it. This is a huge bill. And Alderman Savage has said that he would be happy to come to the commission at one of our future meetings and to give us a briefing about the whole scope of the legislation. You can find it online, but it is long. It's long and detailed. And so we just touched just a small part, a very, very small part of it tonight. And I wanted to cover it because it does impact what our commission does. And I want to make sure that I'm able to tell the city council and tell the alderman that I'm speaking here on behalf of the commission, not just my capacity as chair. Okay, we're going to move on the agenda. The next item is the election of chair and vice chair for 2021, 2022. Our bylaws require that there be an annual election of those two officers. The city charter also has a requirement too that boards and commissions elect the officers on an annual basis. Just to let you know, I have been chair of this body for 20 years. This is my 20th anniversary as chair. It's a long time. You know, I'm willing to continue, but if there's someone who'd like to be chair, this is their opportunity. It won't hurt my feelings. Edith Knight, I thought Edith was going to join us tonight, but she hasn't. I did speak with her. She said she'd be happy to continue serving as vice chair. So this is right now in the hands of the commission. How do you want to handle it? Usually we have little papers to pass out if we've got a contested election or something like that. But if we have that, we'll have to figure out something because I don't know of any way of doing that via Zoom. The matter is before the commission. We need to have some suggested course of action.
Is there anyone else that would like to put their name up for president of the commission? Let's not all jump up at once.
There isn't anyone better than Mike.
Well, thank you. That's very nice, Rosemary.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I'm certainly not indispensable. That's for sure.
I would be very comfortable with a motion to for Mike and Edith to be renominated and put before a vote.
Okay.
I second it.
Okay. All right. Is there any? Well, let me just actually poll the commission individually on this. Well, let's say you can vote yes, no, or abstain. I'm just going to go around. Diane?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Okay. Jay?
Yes.
Okay, I'll vote yes too. We're drawing a consensus. Okay, so I'm happy to serve you for another year in this capacity. The next item on the agenda is for a progress report on the working group on police recruitment procedures. And this is a body that both Chuck and Jay are serving on. Has anything happened with that in the last couple of months?
Not that I'm aware of, Jay, am I right?
That's correct. I mean, nothing on both the police recruitment procedures. I know we're not there yet, but also nothing on the civilian advisory panel either.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, unless Chuck has something else.
Well, no, just that I'm assuming the Civilian Review Board Advisory Panel is affected by Will Rowell's leave of absence. Yeah. And hopefully he would return to good health and that would get up and going again, which again would probably impact upon, at least the 4 or 5 sections you mentioned in Savage's bill, because it would have, other authorities there.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. I again like to express my appreciation both to Chuck and Jay for continuing to serve on this. And you're absolutely right with respect to the framework for a civilian advisory panel on alleged police misconduct. Will's health situation has since he was coordinating it is affecting it, and we'll just continue to, I guess, wait to hear from Tricia as to the issue related to police, the recruitment. Both of those are extremely important parts of police reform. And so
The recruitment part may be superseded by some of the federal legislation, as well as the state establishment of a clearinghouse of officers that have been disciplined. So there are a lot of levels to this.
Yeah. Does the Police Reform Act that passed the Maryland General Assembly have anything in it regarding recruitment kinds of matters?
It does. So
Right.
it makes changes to conditions on certification through the Maryland Police Training Commission, but it also has changes to the recruitment, meaning when an officer applies, let's say an officer applies to the Annapolis Police Department, he or she will have to provide all instances of police employment prior to that application to the police department, and then certify or give them the authorization to look at all of their internal affairs records for each of those police departments. And then the police department will have to certify that they reviewed all of the internal affairs records. On top of that, there's also a database that's going to be created by the Maryland Police Training Commission that allows sort of tracking or at least listing of officers that have been terminated or fired or left employment as a result of excessive force. Or it could be serious misconduct, but it certainly is excessive use of force. I would have to double check that. But there have been changes related to recruitment, related to hiring, and related to sort of continued employment, including training every year. There's a mental health screening that they have to undergo every 2 years, and then a physical agility test every year, and then certain other mandates. It's pretty comprehensive legislation. I could probably talk to you about it for like 3 hours. So that's just a very brief sort of synopsis of at least the changes related to hiring and recruitment.
Well, the reason that we're really concerned about that is because it is well known that white supremacist organizations have been making attempts around the country to seed police departments with their members. And once hired, it becomes tricky to fire an officer on the basis of that person's political or other beliefs. And so what you want to do is make sure that when a police officer is hired for the city of Annapolis, that there's been a thorough vetting of that individual's background, including comments that have been made on social media. And that's, I think, that was really the driving force behind the creation of that particular work group. And I know there's been conversations with the chief about that and the like, but I think that's an integral part of police reform. We absolutely do not want to have police officers on the force in the city of Annapolis who hold bigoted views. And unfortunately, that's happened in other jurisdictions. I'm not saying that currently is a problem in Annapolis. I don't know of anything like that, but we don't want to go there. And so that's why we're going to continue to press on this and see what the city comes up with. Which moves us to our next one, and that's looking ahead to a public hearing on hate crimes and hate incidences in County Council District 6. You'll recall, we're going to go back in time here. This is a Back to the Future exercise, and there was a major program attended by large numbers of people about hate crimes and incidents in Anne Arundel counties. At Anne Arundel Community College, it was sponsored and organized by the County Executive Pittman's office, extremely well attended. Lots of recommendations came out of it. One of the things that this commission had decided to do was to hold a public hearing about the issue of whether people had been affected by hate crimes or hate incidents, and give people a chance to report, and then we would do a report back on it. We also opened it up to doing a joint session, doing it jointly with the Human Relations Commission of Anne Arundel County, because they encompass County Council District 6. the county commission's chair told me, that's Roberto Veloso, said, we will join you for it, but we would like you to take the lead. Because we have a whole lot of other areas of Anne Arundel County that we're responsible for, so we would like your commission to take lead on that. So it is my hope. Now, right now, all boards and commissions of the city are still meeting virtually. City council has been approved to meet in person. The standing committees of city council are meeting in person, but the hope is that by the fall, that the boards and commissions of the city will be able to meet in person as well. And it would be at that time that I would like this commission to move ahead and organize a public hearing on hate crimes and incidents within our community. Now, just in the past few months, the Congress has passed legislation regarding responses to hate crimes based on race or ethnicity. The prompting for that was the outbreak of incidents in which Asian Americans have been targeted. However, the legislation did not limit it to Asian Americans. It simply said on the basis of race or ethnicity. This commission can go even further because our scope could also include religion. And we've known that there have been anti-Jewish actions and activities that have occurred around the country in recent days. I think largely a response to the situation in Palestine and Israel. And I'm not going to go. We're not into that issue, but rather we are into if people are targeted because of their religion, and that has occurred. We could also look at it in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity. There's been lots of controversy over that. Individuals who are transgender have experienced discrimination and the like. And there's a major effort now before the school board of Anne Arundel County to develop a set of policies on this. So if we were decided to go ahead, we don't have to limit it, and we shouldn't limit it, in my opinion, just to race, ethnicity. I think we should broaden that out to include all of the areas in which the commission has jurisdiction in terms of hate crimes and hate incidences. That would be race, ethnicity, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, and gender identity, and perhaps some others, and just open it up broadly. What prompted this initial action by the county executive's office was, you'll recall, it was a report, the annual report from the Maryland State Police had Anne Arundel County as having the largest single number of hate crimes that were reported. I think the most recent report moves us back to second place. But it's still, Anne Arundel County has been an area where there's been lots of these. And so what I would like to do is, just as soon as we get the green light from the mayor's office to meet in person, that we organize a public hearing on this subject and invite our counterparts from the county commission to join us. And what we'll need to do is identify a time and a place for doing that. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that as part of our agenda for our September meeting. At our September meeting, we will also need to take up the selection of the award honoree for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Award. There will be the awards breakfast committee, the memorial breakfast committee will be held this year in January. And I've already been contacted asking for who our nominee will be. We can do that in September. Any questions about any of this?
Yeah, Mike,
Yeah, Diane?
what do we do with the incidents that people are bringing out in terms of harassment? It's like, okay, we have 20 people that recount incidences.
Mhm.
And so what? What do we do?
Well, what we would do is we have the authority, once we've had a public hearing, we can prepare a report with recommendations to the city council, and we can send it to the county councils, assuming that the County Human Relations Commission continues to want to share this with us for this particular one. So that's what we can do. That's our authority.
Yeah, I guess when people come and they voice their concerns, I think they would like to know that something's going to happen or something's going to change or someone's going to do something about it. For me to come to a public forum and say, I have been identified and harassed because of my curly hair belonging to a certain group. Okay, well, I come and tell you and it's off my chest, but who's going to do something about it? And what are they going to do?
And once again, this commission doesn't have the authority to do anything but raise issues, get people provide a forum for dialogue and discussion. And the situation here is we're going to make darn sure that we get the media out to cover it, make sure the Capitol is there to cover it. If there's enough interest, it'll probably hit the front page of the newspaper. Then you bring it to city council, and then the council can talk about it. And that's why you can have recommendations and say there's some specific things that we think ought to be done, C, D, and E. But in the end, that's what authority we have under the law. Do folks still want to have a hearing on this? It's been some time. The plans were cut
I
short.
still think it'd be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I think these issues have not
I'm
been
sorry,
adequately
Chuck.
dealt with. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you when you started.
Oh, I was saying, I think a hearing would be helpful. That, a lot of these issues have been festering in the community for a very long time and have not been adequately dealt with. Even, I'm Carrie laid out the procedures that are currently available in Police Accountability Board and the Internal Affairs on the issues of police activity. But we want to be open to listening and making recommendations, meaningful recommendations, to make clear that that hate has no home in Annapolis.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that we were, kind of hit by a brick by not being able to meet in public for 15 months.
Yeah.
That kind of slowed the progress of continuing to have this common conversation. So,
Mhm.
I think that that we continue at least on the path that we started.
Okay. Okay, any other thoughts or comments on this?
No, I think we should have it.
Okay, all right, well, we'll proceed. We'll go ahead and we'll do that. And but again, I want to schedule it once we're definitely able to have in-person meetings. And right now, as I said, it's not certain. That has not been decided upon by the powers to be. Well, our final item on the agenda is a report from the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And Dia, I'm going to call on you if you would give us a report, but you've got to take yourself off mute.
I do not have anything, actually.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, though.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, that concludes our meeting. Just to remind you, the commission does not meet in July and August unless we have some incredibly pressing business, like a complaint, which again is very rare. So this is our summer vacation. We will convene back in September, and if it's usual, I'll have to check the calendar and see, but it's usually that we meet, I think, let me check the calendar. Let's see. Yes, it would be the second Monday in September because the first Monday is Labor Day. So our meeting would be September the 13th. So we have a long interregnum, a long break. And I hope everyone has a really good summer. And next fall, hopefully we are able to meet in person. We will get our activities going again. And I'd like to also express thanks to Carrie Berger for
Yeah.
being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Also to Brigitta Sundstrom from City of Annapolis TV, who has enabled us to use the marvelous technology of Zoom to enable us to meet. So if there's nothing else, our meeting stands adjourned.
Mike, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Has anybody else had trouble for the last two notices from Mike downloading the agenda and the minutes? Because I can't do it on Microsoft. I used to do it because you had it right there with your email. I never had any trouble, but
Well, I can, I stopped doing that because most people simply printed the thing off, but I can go back and just simply keeping it as email text. It's easy.
well, I do print it off of your email, but I haven't been able to download it the last two times. It's me, I'm sure, but I can't figure it out.
Yeah, if others had difficulty, I mean, it's an easy thing for me to fix. I can simply, what I did in the past was I attached it as a Word document, but then also as email text. And I stopped doing this. I stopped doing that because embedded in the message was the Zoom coordinates. People had to click on the Zoom coordinates.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, I get it, but I'll just come to your house and ask you to print it up or something.
Well, no, I mean, I'll just do it as email text, so I can continue. We'll do it.
No big deal.
That way. No, but I certainly want folks to get a copy of the agenda.
Yeah, I do miss that. Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks to all again.
Okay, bye.
Good night.
Bye.